Hello folks, my name is Mark, this is Mark's Movie Reviews, and today we are looking at Captain America Civil War, which if you haven't seen it yet, you should go see it because it's awesome. So this is my now second favorite movie in the MCU universe. The first being the original Captain America. I really love that movie. And next in line being Avengers. So it's really that good. I think it's as good as, if not better than, the first Avengers movie. So one thing you may be wondering about is, Civil War, is it going to be like the comic event? And it is inspired by the comic event. I mean, obviously it doesn't have all the same characters and such, and it doesn't play out exactly the same way, but it is an adaptation of the comic event story. So if you know the comic event story, you know what happens here. Just first off, nobody dies. Right. At the end of the comic event, Captain America is assassinated. Well, not really assassinated, but, no one in comics ever really dies, right? But, so that didn't really happen that way here, and I was kind of, that was cool. I was surprised that they didn't do that, because it seemed to me like they were setting it up to have somebody else take over, the role from Chris Evans, but didn't do that, so that was cool. And the big question that everybody was wondering about is how is Spider-Man gonna fit in, and it's a good introduction. It's not exactly how it's handled in the comic. Like in the comic, he reveals his identity to the world and all that stuff, and gives this very this speech and all that stuff, and he doesn't do that here. Here he's just sort of like introduced for the first time, and it works out pretty well. The actor that got to play him is I think his name's Tom Holland, and captures it pretty good. He's a pretty good Peter Parker. Of course, we only really get about 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes of Spider-Man in the whole movie, so it isn't really enough to explore the character, but it's a good introduction, and you get to see him in action, and of course just having Spider-Man fight along Captain America and stuff like that is like a dream come true for me. I mean, I was just in geek heaven when I first saw that trailer, and in the movie it doesn't disappoint. And I think they capture Spider-Man pretty well. He does all the quips and everything. In fact, they make a couple of jokes about that. There's one joke where they say, well, usually there's not this much conversation in a fight or something like that. There's not this much talking or whatever. So that's really cool, and they go out of their way to point out that Spider-Man is a teenager in this one. He's got homework, and he thinks he thinks The Empire Strikes Back is an old movie and stuff like that. Well, it is, but still, so it works pretty well. There are a lot of characters fighting for screen time in this movie, but everybody gets at least one scene, which is really cool. So, most of them get more than one, but everybody gets a little bit of development. They all get a speech, or they all get a monologue or a scene or something to kind of move them along a little bit. So no one is really just thrown in there as window dressing, not really, they're not just like, hey, we have this guy, let's use him. It's not like that. It's like everybody gets a little bit of development, right? It does kind of seem like they're going into Marvel action figure overload a little bit, but it's not the same way. For example, the third X-Men movie also had 50 characters. And in that movie, it just seemed like they were just throwing them in because they could. And it doesn't really come out that way here. Here, they all interact with each other, and they all, they get a chance to grow. I think Ant-Man is used really well. Black Panther, damn. Black Panther nearly steals the show, in my opinion. The actor they got for him just rules, and the character is, dangerous, They show him fighting on par with Captain America and Winter Soldier. And I don't know. I think the Black Panther movie, from what I see in this movie, the Black Panther movie is gonna fucking kick ass. It's gonna be cool. But anyway, all of these characters, though, it doesn't detract from Captain America and Winter Soldier, who are because this is a Captain America movie. It's not an Avengers movie, and it doesn't detract from them. They of course get the most screen time and the most development and all that stuff. I mean, it focuses on them, on those two, and also, surprisingly, Iron Man, who plays the villain sort of kind of in this movie. not really the villain, but he's the, the anti, bad guy hero. The villain is actually Baron Zemo, which they change him a lot from the source material, but unlike every other Marvel movie, he doesn't actually die. So that's cool. And they could always bring him back and give him the mask and stuff like that. But for what they did with him, he's actually pretty, a good adaptation. He's very sinister and manipulative and stuff like that. I do think if there was anyone that was underutilized, it was Crossbones, who was introduced in Winter Soldier and actually got more screen time in Winter Soldier than he did in this. And he basically ends up getting killed in his only scene. And I think he was kind of tragically underutilized. In the comics, Crossbones is a much more, his character is a lot more range, And I think it would have been cool here. In fact, I think they could have combined Zemo and Crossbones and just had Crossbones be the guy that set all this stuff up, They could have just done it like that. But, Crossbones, when his scene he does, that he gets, he is pretty awesome. It's basically a fight scene, and, it's pretty cool. It's just, I kind of wish that they wouldn't have killed him off. But anyway, getting back to the actual plot, Marvel movies, like, they tend to, like, build things up and then tear them down, And you saw the same thing in the other, the Captain Winter Soldier, they build up S.H.I.E.L.D. in the first one, and then they tear it down in number 2, and then this one is kind of like the disassembling of the Avengers, they tear the Avengers down, which kind of leaves it open for what's going to happen next, because, they're going to come back in, Infinity War or whatever, and, but it's kind of a cool development, it leaves it open for, the Secret Avengers, which was another series that, was going for a little while, either that or the New Avengers. Like for a little while in the comics, there were 2 parallel Avenger teams, one of them sanctioned and the other one not. And I think that's where they might be going with this. That'd be kind of cool. There's probably not going to be a Secret Avengers movie, but they might allude in the TV show that, like, Cap and his team are out there running around doing stuff, saving the day, without the sanction of, the United Nations or whatever. Anyway, it's really good. It's action packed. It's long, but does not feel long. There's lots of scenes of people jumping off of buildings and stuff. That seems to be something like a running theme through this. Like 3 or 4 times, like Cap, Bucky, or Black Panther seem to like make these impossible leaps of like 40 feet or more and not get hurt. That was just sort of like, what? But it doesn't detract from it. I mean, it's a comic book movie for all, There's some pretty impressive feats in this as well. You've seen the preview where Cap is like holding the helicopter with his like brute strength, keeping it from getting away and stuff like that. So there's lots of that kind of thing, lots of dramatic fight scenes and stuff like that. And I think it's probably the most solid addition that I've, it's definitely better than Age of Ultron, I would say that. It's like better than that. It's as good as the first Avengers movie. And I would even say better than the first Avengers movie, in my opinion. So if you haven't seen it yet, go see it. And it's just another, it seems like the Marvel movies are just like consistently enjoyable, Like they haven't made a crappy one yet. And the ones that people say are crappy are not, they're just not as good as the first. You know what I mean? It's like when you set the bar really high, then you have to hit that bar every single time. And it seems like the ones they make that don't hit the bar are still really good, But this one definitely, I say surpasses it for sure. It's a good example of how you do this kind of thing right. For last month, Batman versus Superman came out, and everybody was like, mad at that because it was such a like crappy movie in hindsight. And this one doesn't have any of those problems, because it seems to be people are comparing it to that movie, and it's like, no, this movie's a much better movie. So anyway, it's a good example of how you do a versus, superhero movie the right way. So go see it, everybody. Adios.